Okay, look, I think I'm almost done, okay? I mean, is this the last coat? Can we start the review now? It's like... Jeez, this is why I never review Windblades anymore. Continuing this week's look at the Titans Return toy line that I'm very far behind on, we have Deluxe Class Windblade, a toy I almost didn't open because, well, I still like the original Windblade toy. It's not that old, and I was kind of debating whether or not I needed any kind of other Windblade figure on the shelves. But I would be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't get my opinion out there and let you know whether or not you should be upgrading your Windblade or not. First off, we have a somewhat familiar jet mode. She has her VTOL fans, and we can see her legs very obvious here in the back, but she is a good bit bulkier now. Wings are a different shape, and of course, a lot more red incorporated into her design than previous. Her red plastic is the majority of her color scheme, with plenty of black plastic showing through, as well as plenty of black paint to mix things up. Overall, it's a far more bright color scheme since it's dominated by the red rather than the black of the original, but it also mixes a lot better, I feel, rather than just having patches of red. This is a more dynamic, I think a more interesting looking vehicle mode. I kind of thrown off by like the Cyclonus style, almost backwards wings going on here, which is interesting. So, form-wise, yeah, it does pretty good. It's a little bit bulkier than it was, so at least it feels more solid, feels heavier, and you can see we have the optional weaponry along the side, which tabs into the bottom of the wings, and we will go ahead and remove for now, so we can go ahead and take a look at the robot, or the jet mode's very clean appearance. And we will start to notice a few things that are a little bit strange about the toy. For instance, you can't escape that gap between the legs in the rear section, can you, Windblade? There's no panel or anything to cover that up, something the original toy did. It's not quite as glaring here, though, since at the very least you have the kibble underneath that's stopping it from looking completely weird. What you can't really avoid are the arms that are just very plainly hanging out here on the sides. Very obvious hands with nowhere to really hide. This is where it pegs in, nothing I can do about it. You do get landing gear. Well, you get these two tabs, and then that landing gear that folds up in order to keep it from scraping along the bottom. But as you can see, she's pretty simple in design, far more simple than her previous figure. Now, I have heard this toy described as a very heavy retool of Highbrow, which is doing this mold a disservice. Virtually no parts are shared between the two toys, and while some of the transformation engineering is similar, you're only going to find one piece that's, well, I'd say a few pieces that are the same, and they're the same ones a Highbrow borrowed from Scourge. We'll get to that here in a bit. For starters, we're going to open up the cockpit. Nice translucent yellow, by the way. And we will take a look at the Titan Master itself, which is a little bit different. This is Scorchfire, whose head is tilted at a weird angle on me for some reason. So, first off, there's actually quite a bit of new molding here. Now, unfortunately, this is, she, I believe this is the only female Titan Master in the line, at least so far. She does have the lack of paint going on. At least her face was painted up, but that's really unfortunate. But what is interesting is that she has rounded shoulders and a much thinner waistline. You can tell they try to add a little bit of a feminine physique to this figure. So, yeah, it does have a noteworthiness there if that's a selling point for you. She has the same articulation as all of them. Ball joints in the shoulders, ball joint in the neck, and the double hinge for the thighs and the knees. And that's pretty much all you get. Now, if you want, we can go ahead and outfit her with the combination weapon, which in this case lets these two swords combine into what on Windblade would be a giant double sword, but on here it looks like the most awesome surfboard ever, which is big enough to sit in. So, sledding along through space, it's kind of a galaxy glider look to it. I kind of dig this. You know, it's kind of a fun little thing. Make it a weapon for Windblade or make it a little tiny vehicle for your Titan Masters. Either way works for me. So, I'll go ahead and split them up, and we'll go ahead and get ready for the robot mode. And just before we forget, yes, the VTOL fans don't spin anymore, but they do rotate around which is a nice little feature. Gives her a little bit of action playability. You also have 2 Titan Master pegs there if you want someone to catch a ride. But that said, we need to get her transformed. So, legs flip out like so. Arms unpeg from underside of the wings. Those will hinge upward to get into the proper position. This is where you kind of see the same skeleton of Scourge that Highbrow also incorporated. That spine trick that slides in like so. And you'll note the thighs are the exact same mold. These are the only pieces that seem to be shared between the 3 molds, so it's really hard to call it a remold. It's more like it's just borrowing about, 5 to 10% of its parts from some other toy. I don't recall Scourge having such a slim waistline or such an ample bust. But hey, maybe I'm just not paying enough attention. So, like Highbrow, yes, the bulk of the vehicle mode's front goes and folds into that backpack. And now we need to fold up the head and go ahead and attach like so. And just like that, we have our Deluxe Class Windblade in a robot mode. As said, she's a very simple, quick to change style transformer. Nothing too complex, but if you're looking for clever engineering or any transformation tricks, this one's probably going to be a little bit disappointing in that regard. So let's see where she does have some strengths. Well, first off, you do have that face and that head sculpt. This is the thing everyone told me when I first said, well, I don't know. I'm thinking about selling it. What do you guys think? And everyone went, well, at least her face is IDW style. And that is true. Just like the original Windblade, a ton of paint has gone into the head to make sure she looks appropriate for the character, and this is far closer to how she looks in the IDW comics. Aside from having a giant block for a head, though that extra sculpting you saw on Scorchfire does give her head a more rounded look, so it's not quite as squarish as some of the others in this line. So you at least have that advantage working for you. Beyond that, we've got a bunch more red again, working well with the black. Now we're getting into more familiar territory. This is closer to Windblade's normal look in her original figure, which also means this is where it starts getting a little bit iffy whether or not you need to have a second Windblade in your life. I'm going to go ahead and we'll fold the wings back just a little bit so we can get a better silhouette going here, a little bit more accurate to how she looks in the comic books. She's a fair bit bulkier now, too, than the original toy. Do I have the original one in reach? Yes, I do. Go ahead and give you the comparison shot. She is noticeably a little bit taller and a little bit differently proportioned. You definitely have a more feminine look to the original, with a larger head and a smaller torso. Definitely in the legs as well, where the new Windblade has far bulkier legs and, it's just different proportions going on here. Depends on what you want out of your Windblade or where you've really found her in the art style of the comic books at the time. So it's not bad, but it's just different. And whether or not that difference is good or bad, up to you. I will say bulkier means she actually has actual heels now, rather than the high heels that make the original one a little bit hard to stand. So stability-wise, she's got a big edge. And I guess that makes sense when you have a pair of swords as your standard weapons. This time, far bigger. They are not her signature little, sweeping energon blade that looks so cool. They're just a couple of generic little swords that can combine together. So at least they keep with her weaponry theme, but at the same time, no. It seems like she lost her really cool sword and just had to pick up 2 pieces of scrap metal and sharpen up real quick so she could get back into the fight. Of course, that's just me and my fan fiction in my head talking, I guess. So, let's take a look. At the very least, she has some more color going on. I like the blue. So we'll go ahead and look at the articulation. Aside from wings and such that you can position in other ways, you have a ball-jointed neck, of course. They all have ball-jointed necks in this toy line. So, shoulders have a good range of motion. It gets a little bit caught there on the hinges in the back in some positions, but you should be able to work around most without getting too in the way. Bicep swivel works all the way around, elbows to the 90 degree. There's nothing in the wrist, which is really unfortunate for any kind of sword-wielding character. Wrist rotation and a wrist bend even better, which makes her a little bit clunky, as far as swordsmanship goes. Nothing in the waist thanks to that weird transformation, but we do have universal thighs that work pretty well as a 360 thigh swivel and really good deep knee bends. So at the very least, she's posable. Decently posable. I could argue that she needs a wee bit more, but at the very least, thanks to those new larger feet, she is quite stable and manages to hold her poses very well. So at the very least, that she has an edge on the original toy as well. That's pretty much what you get for Titan's Return Windblade. It is a very simple figure, and calling it a remold is a bit of a misinterpretation of the toy. She shares some parts, but she definitely stands as her own figure. Her simplicity, as well as maybe a feeling of redundancy, might be what keeps you away from the toy. It's not a bad figure for, by any stretch of the means. It just feels like a less interesting figure than her original. And I'd say if you've got the first one and you're perfectly fine with that, you're not going to get a whole lot more out of this. But if you want something that strikes the IDW a little bit better, as well as something that stands up a little bit easier, then I don't think this is such a bad shot.